I paid for my parents' retirement, but they left everything to my sister. She deserves it more, they said. So I let them enjoy their decision, until they needed my help again. My name is Alex, I'm 35 years old, and for most of my life, I've been the responsible one. The fixer. The one who had to step up when no one else would. I've worked hard to build a successful career in finance, climbing my way up from an entry-level position to a well-paying managerial role. I own my home, I have savings, and I make smart investments. Everything I have, I earn through sheer determination and discipline. But despite all that, my parents always made it clear that my achievements didn't matter as much as my younger sister Lisa's happiness. Lisa has always been the golden child. Growing up, she was the one who got everything she wanted without ever having to work for it. If she wanted a new bike, she got it. If she broke something, someone else would replace it. If she failed a class, my parents would fight the school to let her retake the test. Meanwhile, I had to work hard for everything. Straight A's were expected from me, but barely passing was just Lisa's way of learning. If I wanted something, I had to save for it myself. If I ever messed up, I had to deal with the consequences alone. It wasn't just about material things, though. The emotional divide was even worse. I could win awards, get promotions, and achieve milestone after milestone, but the response was always lukewarm. "That's great, Alex. We're proud of you," they'd say before immediately shifting the conversation to Lisa's latest drama. If Lisa so much as mentioned a problem, though, they'd move heaven and earth to fix it for her. I thought things would change as we got older, but they never did. Lisa drifted from job to job, never holding anything down for more than a few months. My parents always had an excuse ready for her. She was finding herself, she just needed a little help, she wasn't as naturally responsible as I was. I, on the other hand, was the one they relied on. Car broke down? I'd pay for repairs. Medical bills piling up? I'd cover them. Struggling with mortgage payments? I'd step in and make sure they stayed afloat. And then, as they got older, their financial struggles became more severe. My parents never really saved for retirement, and their years of prioritizing Lisa's wants over their own future finally caught up to them. That's when I did what I always did, I stepped in. I helped them downsize their home, I covered their medical expenses, and when they could no longer work, I made sure they were comfortable. I paid off debts, I set up a monthly allowance for them, and I made sure they had everything they needed to live out their retirement years without worry. I did all of this without a second thought, because despite how they treated me growing up, they were still my parents. I wanted them to be okay. I wanted them to have a good life after everything they had been through. But what I didn't realize at the time was that no matter how much I sacrificed, no matter how much I provided, in their eyes, Lisa would always come first. I started my career at a time when every penny counted and every hour worked felt like a small victory against the harsh realities of life. I remember those early days vividly, long, grueling shifts at a job that barely paid enough to cover my rent, let alone the dreams I harbored of building a future. I sacrificed nights out with friends and weekends toiling away extra shifts just to save a little extra money, hoping that one day my hard work would pay off. Every extra dollar was a brick in the foundation of a better life, not just for me, but for the people who depended on me. It wasn't long before I realized that my parents, who had always struggled to make ends meet, were relying on that hard-earned money even more than I did. Their financial struggles had only worsened with time. Medical bills started piling up, the mortgage on our family home became a relentless burden, and their once modest retirement savings dwindled away in the face of unexpected expenses. I made a decision, one that would forever change the course of my life. I was going to help them retire early and live comfortably, regardless of the personal sacrifices it would demand. I began by paying off the mortgage on our family home, scraping together every spare cent I could muster from overtime, bonuses, and even taking on a side job when it seemed like nothing else was enough. I negotiated with banks and managed to clear off debts that had haunted my parents for years, all while watching my bank balance shrink as I poured my savings into their future. I paid for their medical treatments, sometimes covering bills that were astronomically high, all because I couldn't bear to see them suffer when I knew I could make a difference. And while I was out there working tirelessly to secure their well-being, my younger sister Lisa always managed to be the darling of the family. Every time I would show up with a check in hand or a receipt proving that I had taken care of yet another bill, the praise and gratitude would be reserved exclusively for her, as if my sacrifices were just another unpaid favor expected from the dutiful one. Lisa, with her carefree attitude and minimal effort in contributing anything meaningful, was showered with compliments and lavish praise by our parents, who seemed oblivious to the toll it was taking on me. I began to notice that no matter how much I gave, the acknowledgement was never mine, it was always redirected to her. The more I sacrificed, the more it felt like my efforts were swallowed up by an endless pit of ingratitude. I would get home after a long day, exhausted yet proud of the support I had provided, only to hear my parents discuss Lisa's recent accomplishments with a sparkle in their eyes, completely dismissing the fact that I had been the one to shoulder the financial burden. I worked through countless sleepless nights, meticulously budgeting and scrimping to ensure that every dollar was accounted for, all in the hope that my parents would finally understand the weight of my sacrifices. I remember sitting at my cluttered desk, surrounded by bills and receipts, feeling a mixture of pride and despair. I knew I was doing the right thing, that my sacrifices were necessary to give my parents a dignified retirement, yet a part of me slowly began to question whether it was all worth it. The more I gave, the more I felt invisible in their eyes. My hard work, my late nights, my sweat and tears were seen as mere obligations, expected and never celebrated. Every month, as I watched the balance of my savings dwindle, I also watched the chasm between my contributions and the recognition I received widen. I started to realize that their praise for Lisa wasn't just misplaced affection, it was a deep-seated bias that had been ingrained in our family for years. It was as if my parents believed that because Lisa had always been the gifted one, she somehow deserved all the accolades, while I was simply the sacrificial lamb destined to carry the burdens of our family. This realization hit me hard, and I began to wonder if all the sacrifices were a thankless investment that would never yield any form of reciprocation. Despite the mounting evidence that my efforts were undervalued, I couldn't bring myself to stop. I was driven by a sense of duty, a love for my parents that overrode any resentment I might have felt. I continued to pay off debts, cover unexpected expenses, and ensure that their retirement was secure, even as the cost to my own financial stability grew more apparent. I became a silent martyr in my own life, giving until there was almost nothing left for me, and yet, every time I looked at their content, happy faces in a new, comfortable home, I couldn't help but feel that a part of me was left behind, unappreciated and unseen. In the quiet moments when I thought no one was watching, I allowed myself to acknowledge the bitter truth: no matter how much I sacrificed, it was never enough to earn the recognition I so desperately craved. The harsh reality was that my parents, in their misguided love, had always valued the ease and charm of my sister over the weight of my responsibilities, and that realization would haunt me long after the last bill was paid. I should have seen the signs a long time ago. Maybe I did, but I just didn't want to believe it. It was always Lisa. No matter what she did, no matter how little effort she put in, she was always the one they showered with praise. I used to think that maybe it was just because she was the youngest, the baby of the family, but as we got older, it became obvious Lisa could do no wrong in their eyes, and I was always the one expected to pick up the slack. When we were kids, Lisa was the one who constantly got away with everything. If we both got in trouble, I was the one punished. If Lisa broke something, I was the one scolded for not stopping her. If I got a good grade, it was expected. If Lisa barely scraped by, it was an achievement worth celebrating. I thought things would change as we grew up, that at some point they would start treating us equally, but I was wrong. Even as adults, it was always Lisa they defended, even when she was obviously in the wrong. I remember one particular incident that should have been a wake-up call. Lisa had borrowed a significant amount of money from me again. She was supposed to pay me back within a few months, but of course, months turned into years, and I never saw a single cent. When I finally brought it up, she acted like I was being unreasonable, like I had some nerve expecting her to actually hold up her end of the deal. I wasn't even angry about the money at that point, I was just tired of being taken for granted. I mentioned it to my parents, thinking they would at least understand my frustration. Instead, they immediately took her side. Lisa has a lot on her plate right now, my mom said, as if I didn't. You have a stable job, and she's still figuring things out, my dad added, as if Lisa wasn't already in her 30s. It didn't matter that I had been financially supporting them for years, that I had helped them retire early and paid off their debts. What mattered was that Lisa had an excuse, and in their eyes, that was enough. The favoritism wasn't just about money. It was in everything. Every holiday, every family gathering, every single time we were all in the same room together, it was always about Lisa. If I brought a gift, it was acknowledged briefly and set aside. If Lisa brought something, no matter how small, it was the most thoughtful, amazing, wonderful thing they had ever received. If I accomplished something at work, they barely reacted. If Lisa even mentioned the possibility of a new opportunity, they acted like she was destined for greatness. I had spent years working my way up in my career, climbing the ladder through sheer hard work and sacrifice, but my achievements were met with indifference. Lisa, on the other hand, coasted through life, bouncing from one job to another, never really settling, yet she was always the one they admired. They spoke about her as if she was the most accomplished person in the family, despite the fact that I was the one who had built something stable, something lasting. It wasn't just frustrating, it was painful. I tried to brush it off, to tell myself that I didn't need their validation, but deep down, it hurt. I didn't need to be worshipped or treated like a hero, but I at least wanted to be acknowledged for everything I had done for them. I wanted them to see me, to appreciate me, but no matter what, Lisa always came first. Then there were the subtle hints, the small comments that, at the time, I didn't fully understand, but now make perfect sense. Lisa has always been so good with people, my mom would say. She just has a way of making connections. My dad would chime in with, she has a bright future ahead of her. She deserves a little help to get there. I should have known what they were really saying. I should have known they were setting the stage for something much bigger, something that would completely blindside me later on. But back then, I just ignored it. I assumed they were just being supportive parents, that they wanted the best for both of us. I never once considered that when they talked about helping Lisa, they meant at my expense. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. The favoritism, the constant praise, the way they always dismissed my efforts while glorifying hers. I had spent my entire life trying to prove myself to parents who had already made up their minds. No matter how much I gave, no matter how much I sacrificed, it would never be enough to outweigh their unconditional, unquestioning devotion to Lisa. And yet, despite everything, I still didn't see what was coming. I still didn't realize just how far they were willing to go to put Lisa first. It wouldn't be long before I found out, and when I did, it changed everything. For years, I had worked tirelessly to make sure my parents could enjoy their retirement. Everything I had done, every sacrifice, every late night, every financial decision, was made with them in mind. I never hesitated to give. I never questioned whether they appreciated it. I just assumed they did. After all, why wouldn't they? With my help, my parents had paid off their mortgage, eliminated their debts, and were finally able to live comfortably. No more worrying about bills, no more stress over medical expenses. I had made sure of that. My dad spent his days relaxing in his garden, while my mom enjoyed her hobbies without financial strain. They traveled, ate at nice restaurants, and finally had the retirement they had always dreamed of. And I was happy for them. But as time went on, I started thinking about the future, not just mine, but theirs. They weren't getting any younger. I wanted to make sure everything was in place for when the inevitable happened. It wasn't an easy conversation to have, but it was a necessary one. One evening, while visiting them, I casually brought it up. Have you guys thought about what's going to happen, you know, when you're not around anymore? My mom waved a hand dismissively. Oh, we've got it all figured out. You don't have to worry about anything. That should have been a red flag. I pressed a little further, asking about the will, how their assets would be divided, just so I could make sure everything was handled properly. They hesitated, looked at each other. And then, finally, my dad spoke up. Well, your mother and I talked it over, and we think it's only fair that everything goes to Lisa. I actually laughed. I thought it was a joke. Okay, seriously, what's the plan? But they weren't joking. Everything is going to Lisa, my mom repeated, her voice softer now, as if saying it any gentler would somehow make it hurt less. I felt my stomach drop. Everything? They nodded. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I've been the one supporting you. I paid off your debts, I made sure you could retire without a single worry. I send you money every month. And you're leaving everything to Lisa? My mom sighed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. She deserves it more. I just stared at her, waiting for some kind of explanation that would make this make sense. She has a family to take care of, my dad added. She needs the money more than you do. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. And I don't? I don't deserve anything after everything I've done for you. It's not about that, my mom said quickly. It's just... Lisa struggles. You're doing well for yourself. You don't need it. I had never felt anger like that before. So because I was responsible, because I worked hard and made sure I could take care of myself, that means I get nothing? But Lisa, who has spent her entire life making bad decisions, she gets everything. She has kids, my mom said, as if that was the final argument that should end the conversation. So do plenty of people, I shot back. That doesn't mean they deserve a free ride. My dad frowned. It's not a free ride. It's just fair. Fair, that word made my blood boil. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice shaking now. I spent my entire adult life making sacrifices for you, making sure you were financially stable. I made sure you could retire early, that you never had to worry about money again. And your way of showing gratitude is to give everything to Lisa, because you think she deserves it more? They didn't answer. I let out a bitter laugh. Unbelievable. My mom reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Honey, don't be like this. It's not personal. Not personal. That was the worst part. It wasn't even malicious. They genuinely believed they were doing the right thing. That they were being fair. I stood up, feeling like the walls were closing in on me. Wow. Just, wow. My dad sighed. We didn't think you'd take it this hard. I shook my head, trying to stop the bitter laugh that was threatening to break out. Of course, you didn't. You never do. You've never thought about how I feel about anything. You just assume I'll be fine, because I always am, right? My mom opened her mouth, then closed it. I looked at them both, really looked at them, and saw it clearly for the first time. They had never truly valued me. Not the way they valued Lisa. In their eyes, I wasn't a son, I was a safety net. A provider? Someone they could rely on but never reward. And now, when it came time for them to show me even an ounce of appreciation, they had nothing to give. Because in their minds, I didn't need it. I didn't need them. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had spent my whole life trying to prove to them that I was worthy, that I was the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who always stepped up. And none of it mattered. Lisa was always going to be the one they put first. No matter what. I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded slowly. Okay. My dad looked relieved, as if I was finally accepting their decision. I'm glad you understand. I smiled. A cold, emotionless smile. Oh, I understand perfectly. And that was the moment I decided I was done. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the conversation over and over in my head, trying to understand how my own parents could betray me like that. It wasn't even about the money, no, it was about what it represented. About how little they valued me. How, even after everything I had done, I was still nothing more than an afterthought to them. By the time the sun came up, I had made my decision. I went back to their house later that morning, my mind set on one thing: I needed answers. I needed to hear them say it out loud. I needed to understand how they could look me in the eye, knowing everything I had done for them, and still think this was fair. When I walked in, they were both sitting in the kitchen, sipping their coffee like it was just another day. Like they hadn't just told their only son that he meant absolutely nothing to them. My mom smiled at me, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. Oh, honey, you're back. Want some coffee? I ignored her and went straight to the point. I need to know why. My dad sighed like he had been expecting this. We already explained, son. Lisa needs it more than you. I clenched my jaw. Why do you keep saying that like it makes sense? I was the one who took care of you. I was the one who made sure you never had to worry about money again. And now, when it's time to actually acknowledge that, you tell me that I don't need anything? Mom set down her cup, her expression soft. Patronizing. Sweetheart, money isn't everything. You're doing well for yourself. You'll be fine. I felt my stomach turn. That's not the point. You're missing the entire point. Dad rubbed his temples, already tired of the conversation. Son, we're not saying you don't deserve anything. But your sister, she has a family. She has. Mom stood up now, desperate. Honey, please, don't do this. Don't let this drive a wedge between us. I felt strangely calm. Numb, even. You already did that. I turned and walked out, ignoring my mom's pleading voice behind me. That was the last time I spoke to them for a long, long time. At first, I expected them to reach out, to realize their mistake and try to fix it. But days passed. Then weeks. Then months. And nothing. No phone calls. No messages. No apologies. I waited, thinking maybe they would come to their senses. That maybe they would miss me, but the silence stretched on, and I realized something. They didn't care. They never did. And that hurt more than anything else. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. I wasn't carrying the weight of my parents' financial struggles anymore. I wasn't constantly worried about whether they had enough, whether they needed more, whether they were safe and comfortable. That responsibility had been lifted off my shoulders, and suddenly, I could breathe. At first, it felt strange. Like something was missing. I had spent so much of my life putting them first that when they were no longer a part of my daily routine, I didn't know what to do with myself. But that feeling didn't last long. My bank account grew. The money that had once disappeared into paying their mortgage, covering their bills, and ensuring their comfort now stayed with me. I could finally focus on my own future. I invested, saved, traveled. For the first time ever, I put myself first, and it felt good. No more emergency calls asking for money. No more guilt-tripping conversations about how I should be doing more. No more being treated like a walking ATM while my sister basked in their affection. I had peace, real peace, and I wasn't about to give it up. That didn't mean they stopped trying. Every so often, I would get a text from my mother. At first, they were simple: "Hope you're doing well," or "We miss you." Then, they became more desperate. "Please talk to us. Can we fix this? We're still your family." I ignored every single one. Lisa, of course, was thriving. She had inherited everything: my parents' house, their savings, their investments. The money I had worked so hard to earn and had given to them had, in the end, only benefited her. And she wasted no time making sure everyone knew it. She went on expensive vacations, bought herself a brand new car, remodeled the house, and flaunted her wealth on social media like she had worked for a single cent of it. She loved playing the role of the devoted daughter, the one who was taking care of our parents in their old age, even though we all knew the truth. She wasn't lifting a finger. She was just spending what I had given. And my parents? They were comfortable. Very comfortable. The same people who used to panic about money, who used to struggle to pay their bills, who I had bailed out time and time again, now had everything they needed. I should have been bitter. I should have been angry. But honestly, I wasn't. Because in the end, I was the one who won. I had my freedom. I had my peace. And that was worth more than anything they could have left me in a will. It had been years since I last heard from them. Years of silence, years of peace. Then, out of nowhere, my phone rang. I saw my mother's name flash on the screen. I almost didn't recognize it. I had long since stopped expecting to hear from them. For a moment, I just stared at it. A part of me wanted to let it ring out, to let the silence continue. But curiosity got the better of me. I answered. Her voice was different. Weaker. More hesitant. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't thrown me away the second I was no longer useful to her. "It's been so long. How are you?" I didn't respond. I just waited. Because I knew. I knew this wasn't just a friendly check-in. There was something she wanted, and sure enough, after a few seconds of forced pleasantries, she got to the point. "It's your father," she said, her voice shaking just enough to make it sound genuine. "His health isn't great. The medical bills have been piling up, and we're struggling to keep up." I stayed silent. She continued, sensing that I wasn't reacting the way she had hoped. "Lisa, she's doing her best, but, well, you know how things are. The economy is tough. She's been trying to help us, but it's just been so hard." I almost laughed. "Lisa? Helping?" I already knew what had happened. I didn't need her to spell it out for me. Lisa had burned through every last cent of what they left her. The house, the savings, the inheritance, everything had gone up in smoke, wasted on luxury vacations, shopping sprees, and bad investments. She had always been reckless, always been spoiled, but now? Now she was broke. And my parents, who had so confidently assured me that she deserved everything, that she needed it more, were left with nothing. I could hear it in her voice. The regret. The fear. But there was something else, too. Something subtle. A hint that she thought I would swoop in, just like before. That I would fix things, just like before. That I would open my wallet, sacrifice my own stability, and save them, just like before. I sat there, holding the phone, listening to the unspoken plea in her voice. And then? I hung up. No words. No reaction. Just silence. Because that's exactly what they gave me when I needed them the most. I didn't have to reach out to know what was happening. The updates came to me, piece by piece, through extended family members who still had their own opinions on the situation. First, it was the house. The grand home my parents had retired in, paid for with my money, was suddenly too expensive for them to maintain. Property taxes, upkeep, utilities, it all added up. And without a steady stream of income, without me there to play the role of their personal ATM, they couldn't keep up. They sold it. Had to. Downsized into a modest apartment, a far cry from the comfort they had enjoyed for years. Then, there was Lisa. The golden child, the one they trusted with everything. The one who was supposed to be their rock, their safety net, the daughter who deserved it all. She was struggling. Bad investments, failed businesses, reckless spending, it had all caught up to her. The lavish vacations? Gone. The designer clothes? Sold. The luxury car? Repossessed. She had started borrowing money from friends. From family. From anyone who would listen to her sob story. And my parents. They weren't just watching their golden child spiral. They were living it with her. I got another call. This time, it was my father. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. And another. Finally, I answered. There was no pretense this time. No fake pleasantries. No small talk. "We need your help." That was it. That was all he said. His voice was quiet, strained, like it hurt him to admit it. I stayed silent. We made a mistake, he continued. Your mother and I, he took a deep breath, like he was swallowing what little pride he had left. Lisa's been struggling. We gave her everything, but she wasn't responsible with it. Wasn't responsible with it? I almost laughed. She had been irresponsible her entire life. That wasn't new. The only difference was that now, they didn't have me to clean up the mess. We're in a bad place, he continued. Your mother's health isn't great. We're behind on rent. The bills, he exhaled sharply. We don't have much left, son. Still, I said nothing. Then, finally, he said it. I know we hurt you. A pause. I know we should have appreciated what you did for us. I know we made the wrong decision. Another pause, this time longer. But we're family. And we need you. I took a breath, letting his words settle. Then I responded. That's not my problem. Silence. Not just on my end, but his. Like he physically couldn't process what I had just said. You don't mean that, he said, a nervous chuckle in his voice. You're just angry. I get it. I do. But this is different. We're really in trouble here. Yeah, I said. I bet you are. Another pause. I don't understand, he said finally. You're successful, you're doing well, why wouldn't you want to help your own parents? I let out a small, bitter laugh. You're right, I said. I am doing well. I'm in the best financial position of my life. You know why? Because for the first time ever, I'm not carrying anyone else's weight. I'm not bailing anyone out. I'm taking care of myself. I could hear my mother's voice in the background. She must have been listening the whole time. Please, she said, her voice cracking. We don't have anyone else to turn to. I shook my head, even though they couldn't see me. You made your decision, I said. Now you get to live with it. And with that, I hung up. The calls didn't stop. The messages kept coming. First, they were desperate. Pleading. Asking for a second chance, for an opportunity to make things right. Then, the apologies started. My father called again, voice cracking under the weight of his own regret. We were wrong, he admitted. We should have seen what you were doing for us all those years. We should have, he inhaled sharply, we should have appreciated you more. We should have never put Lisa above you. It was the first time I had ever heard him say anything like that. My entire life, he had never admitted to being wrong. He had never once acknowledged how he and my mother had treated me. I wasn't sure how to feel. We don't expect you to fix things, he continued. We just don't know what to do. We're lost. We have nothing left. Then my mother got on the line. Please, she whispered. I don't know how we got here. But we need you. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I forgive you, I said. But that doesn't mean I trust you. Silence. I could almost hear the air leave their lungs. What do you mean? My father asked. If you forgive us, then why? Because forgiveness and trust aren't the same thing, I interrupted. I can forgive what you did. I can let go of the anger, of the resentment, of all the years of being treated like an afterthought. But that doesn't mean I'll ever put myself in the position to be used again. More silence. My mother sniffled. But we're your family, she said. Yeah, I said, nodding. I was your family too. That didn't seem to matter when you were making your will. I let the weight of my words sink in before I continued. I'm not giving you money. That's not going to happen. But if you want help getting back on your feet, I'll give you guidance. I can help you budget, help you figure out a plan to get out of this mess. But you have to do the work. I heard my sister scoff in the background. That's it, she snapped. You're just going to sit there and lecture them? You could help them, and you're choosing not to. I smirked. You're right, Lisa. I could help them. Just like I did before. And just like before, you'd sit back and let me do all the work while you wasted everything. Go to hell, she spat. I laughed. You first. My father sighed heavily. We didn't ask for this, he muttered. We just wanted to make sure Lisa was taken care of. And look where that got you, I said. Another long silence. Then, my mother spoke again. "We don't need your pity," she said, her voice turning cold. "We'll figure this out on our own." I shrugged. Good luck with that. I hung up. Years passed, and life only got better for me. Without the constant weight of my parents' financial needs dragging me down, I thrived. My career flourished, my investments grew, and most importantly, I finally started living for myself instead of being someone else's safety net. The freedom was intoxicating. I traveled, made new friends, and found joy in simple things, things I never had time to enjoy before because I was too busy picking up after my parents' mistakes. My life became something I could finally call mine. Meanwhile, my parents weren't so lucky. After I refused to bail them out, they had no choice but to downsize. The comfortable life I had once provided them was gone. Their fancy retirement dreams? Faded. Their golden child? Useless. Lisa was drowning in her own mess. Without unlimited funds to blow, she spiraled. She had no savings, no emergency plan, just an expensive lifestyle she could no longer afford. She tried everything, begging, guilt-tripping, even demanding that I step up, because family is supposed to take care of each other. I didn't even bother responding. From what I heard through extended family, she tried borrowing money from distant relatives, but no one wanted to help someone who had wasted every opportunity she was given. As for my parents, they had no choice but to rely on her now. The very daughter they sacrificed everything for was now their last hope. And she resented them for it. I wish I could say I felt bad, but I didn't. They made their choice. They lived by it. And now, they had to live with it. Funny how the tables turned. I was finally at peace. No regrets, no guilt, no anger. Just clarity. I saw them for who they were, not villains, not monsters, just people who made terrible decisions and had to face the music. And me? I walked away from the wreckage and never looked back. Some people only appreciate your value when they realize they've lost it. By the time they do, it's already too late.